future, that we are working with the NCDOT to find some enhancement monies that are non-DOT budget money to move that project faster. Along with that project is the Kinston bypass project that would be about a half a mile south of the current 70 highway in Kinston. And obviously that project would be above the floodplain. The reason the Princeton project is so important is part of the flooding issues for the northern section of Princeton is related to the highway, the culverts that go under the highway, that go to Little River, not only for the town of Princeton, but our subdivisions that are on Old Rock Quarry Road, Princeton High School, the football field. All of them are influenced by the culverts being too small to, when we're having flash rains or floods, to get the water to the proper source. And as we mentioned in other town board meetings, there's been over 188 accidents in the past 4 years, 5 fatalities, one being a 10-year-old that happened in December. So we still are working on that project, and we will hopefully move that project faster. One other item that we're having more and more public hearings, and that's a good thing because the public knows what's going on, particularly with zoning. But zoning hearings mean we are looking at changes in our zoning and growth in our community. I think our last meeting we had 2 zoning hearings. Tonight we have zoning hearings. Our neighboring town, Wilson Mills, on their agenda for this month is 18 public hearings. So I don't know how they're going to stage 18 public hearings and leave at a comfortable hour, but that just shows the changing towns in Johnston County. So planned growth is very important. With that, I'd like to, for anyone interested, our agendas are becoming longer and longer, and Marla is willing to meet with the town board at 6:00 p.m. prior to the town board meeting to go over any questions in an informal session. We will come here, and if it's at your invitation, if you want to be here, you can be here. If not, but we'll go over any item specifically to get answers for things that, rather than asking all the questions at the public comment area of the meeting, we can get in-depth knowledge of each of the items on our agenda. With that, I'll turn it over to the board for any other comments. No other comments. There has been a updated agenda. Is there a motion to pass the agenda?
Wait.
Oh, okay. Yes. Recognize offers Tool for his law enforcement intermediate certificate. And Chief, would you like to do the honor?
Sure. Good afternoon, or good evening, rather. I'll try to be brief. It is always a pleasure to recognize the achievement of one of our officers. And as you know, Lieutenant Radford had retired the 28th of February. Officer Toole has really stepped up and almost assumed the role as far as assisting me and also being a leader and some guidance to the other officers. I am pleased to present I call it prestigious award to him because it's a intermediate certificate, law enforcement certificate that is not just given out, you have to earn it. And I'll just give you a brief description of what it entails. It is called the Intermediate Law Enforcement Certificate. In order to recognize the level of competence of law enforcement officers serving governmental agencies within the state to foster interest in college education and professional law enforcement, training programs and to attract highly qualified people into a law enforcement career. The Criminal Justice Education Training Standards Commission established the Law Enforcement Officer Professional Certificate Program. With this program, he qualifies by accumulating 32 educational hours, which converts to training points, and at least 8 years experience, by which he's actually 12 years in, so he has 12 years of experience. And so I want to ask Officer 2 to come up, please. And I want to present this intermediate law enforcement certificate to Daniel Eugene Toole. By virtue of the authority vested in the laws of the state and in recognition of the satisfactory completion of the basic training requirements and demonstrated ability to perform those tasks required of the criminal justice officer, the North Carolina Criminal Justice Education and Training Standards Commission hereby awards to Daniel Eugene Toole Intermediate Law Enforcement Certificate. Congratulations.
You have the opportunity to, Daniel, if you want to make any comments, you got, it's your floor.
I'm good.
That's right. Is there a motion to adopt the updated agenda?
We need to strike the audit presentation. It's been moved to the meeting on April the 19th.
Okay.
CPA, the audit, we couldn't make it.
That's 30 minutes off our agenda.
So number 8 we're taking off.
Yes,
Okay.
and he'll be at April 19th.
Okay.
Oh, we also need to add other business, a recycling room. It's been a busy day.
But not 18 public hearings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
There it is.
Commissioner Robinson made the motion
I'll say.
and Commissioner Holmes seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, motion passes. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the March 7th meeting?
There it is.
Okay. I will say the motion was made by Commissioner Robinson, second by Commissioner Holmes. Okay. Next is my honor to
The vote.
all those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? I am on a racetrack here.
You at least get to see the end of it.
That's right.
Oh, good.
If Commissioner Rose would join me to. I can get that.
That's right.
Great job.
Please sit.
Just take a picture.
All right.
If you repeat after me. I, Michael D. Rose,
I, Michael D. Rose,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
and maintain
and maintain
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
not inconsistent therewith,
not inconsistent therewith,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of my
the
office
duties of my office
as Mayor Pro Tem,
as Mayor Pro Tem,
so help me
so
God.
help me God.
I, Michael D. Rose,
I, Michael D. Rose,
do solemnly and sincerely swear
do solemnly and sincerely swear
I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and I will faithfully
and I will faithfully
and bear true allegiance
and bear true allegiance
to the state of North
to
Carolina
the state of North Carolina,
and to the constitutional powers
and to the constitutional powers
and authorities which
and authorities which
are or may be established
are or may be established
for the government thereof,
for the government thereof,
and I will endeavor
and I will endeavor
to support,
to support,
maintain,
maintain,
and defend the Constitution of said state,
and defend the Constitution of said state,
not inconsistent with the Constitution,
not inconsistent with the Constitution
of the United States,
of the United States,
to the best of my knowledge and ability,
to the best of my knowledge and ability.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you.
All right.
I need both. Mayor, before we get started on the annexation, we're gonna need to adopt the resolution to fix the public hearing date. And the reason we're doing this tonight is because, they requested the public hearing after our last board meeting.
Okay,
So we can do it at the same night, but we need to do it first.
okay, so what night would that be?
That is, the resolution fixing, it's, the name.
We can have it tonight, you just need to adopt it before we start the public hearing.
Right.
Okay. So we need a motion to adopt the public hearing for the annexation effective tonight.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
And is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made by Commissioner Martin, seconded by Commissioner Rose. All in favor of conducting the public hearing tonight, raise your right hand. All opposed?
Okay.
So, Ms. Williamson, if our town clerk will go through the report of the planning board and all the required documentation that she has to present to us.
The resolution directing the town clerk to investigate the sufficiency of the petition was adopted and certified December 6th of 2021, so it's already gone through the planning board. And the next step was to do the public hearing. Everything was adopted, like I said, December 6th. The public hearing was set for tonight. It was advertised, posted on social media, the webpage, and at the town hall. The sign is on the property. The neighboring property owners have been notified, and it does meet the requirements for the general statute 168:58.1B. The AME through AME certificate of sufficiency has been signed. The owners did sign the petition, and the petition is valid. So all you have to do now is the public hearing for annexation.
The public hearing is starting at 7:19 and will conclude at 7:40. Excuse me, yeah, 7:40. So 7:50, I'm sorry, 7:50. Does anyone want to speak in favor of the annexation?
You can.
As a part of Princeton, we would love to be the rest of our property annexed. As you guys know, the current property that we have, that the church sits on, is in Princeton. And so the additional property that we bought, it just makes sense to bring it into the town as well. Our heart is Princeton. And the town, I believe, knows that through projects like R3 and the country fair. And so we would just love to have the opportunity to have the rest of the property in the Princeton town limits. So.
Is there anyone that wants to speak not in favor of the annexation? Not to put you on the spot, but Ken, you want to go in details of what might be occurring on the property at some future point? Or?
Well, I could, but how about if I
Defer?
defer?
All right. Do I need to come to the podium? Or?
Yes, please.
All right. So Yeah, we are in the process right now of doing a capital giving campaign. We have drawn up a master plan for all 26 and a half acres that we have. And right now, our first project, phase one, is an $8.5 million worship center along with ministry support center. And we're hoping to be able to start construction on that, hopefully within the year. And so, but we have plans for a large gym and even possibly a adult living facility at some point on the property. So we're excited about what God has done. I know that I had many people who told me when I first came, where we're sitting today is not possible. But I want to remind everybody what the Word says. With God, all things are possible. And the Word also says that God does exceedingly and abundantly above what we ask or what we think. And your church, as in a church that belongs to Princeton, during COVID grew. And not only that, grew financially. And I think it's a testimony of God's goodness and His faithfulness. So.
And I want to think positive, but I could be a candidate for that adult living center somewhere in the, not next year.
Your wife's already called.
Is there anyone who wants to speak for or against the annexation request? If not, I will start the second public hearing at 7:23, and that's rezoning public hearing for Hanson Aggregates Southeast, Rains Mill Road.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Gray Stiers. I am North Carolina legal counsel for Hanson Aggregates. My address is 411 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, and it's a privilege to be before you here this evening. I'll introduce you to some of the folks that are here behind me, and you may ask questions that they may answer because they have better answers than I do. They know better this before than I do. And if I am able to answer your questions and make a presentation that's coherent, then maybe that they won't be asked to speak. But I want to make sure you know who they are and they're here. First, Mr. Alan Burnett, who is Southeast Director of Resource Development for Hanson Aggregates, who came up here from Atlanta today to be here at this hearing tonight. Mr. Darren McMorris. Darren is the General Manager for all of North Carolina operations for Leah Hanson. Ms. Marianne Hurley. Marianne is Project Coordinator for projects in the state of North Carolina, expansion projects. Mr. Jack Garvey is the Environmental Manager for Leah Hanson. Mr. Jerry Marker, some of you may know. Jerry is our plant manager here at Princeton Quarry. And Ms. Erin Catlett is my colleague at Fox Rothschild, and she's helping me set up the exhibits. And she can go ahead and put those on the board, the order that they're there, and I'll get started this evening. But I wanted to let you know who was here with me tonight. To give you a little bit of background, you know the quarry well. What you may or may not know is that the quarry had been a non-conforming use in Johnston County forever until 3 years ago, and we went to the Johnston County Commissioners and we said we'd like to zone the quarry pit as it's currently located, which is across the ETJ line in Johnston County, to a conforming heavy industrial use category in Johnston County, and then additional phases in the future across Rains Mill Road to the northwest, as well as across the river. And we'd like for all of this to be zoned industrial for this to be the future development of the quarry in this area. Because eventually this will play itself out and it will no longer be commercially viable. And then we will move and have additional pits in the future at these two locations. And that rezoning was approved by the Johnston County Commissioners. Subsequent to that, and since then, we have had discussions with some of the Johnston County officials who have seen with the growth of the county, there is very real need for bulk water storage. So as the county grows, the water needs are going to grow, and One option is to have a really big reservoir that's not very deep, or to have a really deep quarry that's not so big, if you're looking for storing water that can be later treated and used as potable water. So Johnston County asked us to evaluate the existing pit as a possibility for a water storage facility for Johnston County. And not that this is a special use permit, but just for the record, I've got copies. If anyone would like to see copies of any of these, I'll be happy to pass them out. And anyone, and this was all in, I think, in the packet. So if you need copies, just let me know. I've got this. And I'll have one copy for the record. So we started examining the possibility of use of this as a drinking water reservoir. And the problem actually is on the ETJ line, the southeast wall of the quarry pit is not sufficiently stable at this time to stay intact with pressure that would come from that being the water storage and the water being in that pit. It's just not geologic. There are lots of geological fissures and cracks, and that wall is not sufficiently stable for it to be a drinking water reservoir. The geological testing have indicated that if we can move that wall back, it will be past the current unstable area and would be a sufficient wall for a reservoir long term. So with that knowledge, we looked at the possibility of extending the wall, but across the ETJ line, we then are in the Town of Princeton's jurisdiction. And while that, and we'll talk about the adjacent zoning and so forth, but currently part of that area is zoned the residential. It's not industrial zone property. So to extend the pit, we need that part of that property that isn't industrial to be zoned to industrial classification. So I'll let Ms. Catlin take down that. And again, this is all attached in your packet. But basically, the Barn Hill asphalt plant on Rainsville Road is zoned heavy industry, I-2, in the Town of Princeton. Also, the area to the east is zoned industrial, and it's currently in Princeton as well. The area in this parcel in the middle, however, has never been zoned industrial. So a threshold issue is to make sure it gets zoned industrial. And sometimes I'm at these hearings, and the challenge is that what my client would like property to be zoned to may or may not be consistent with your land use plan. Because as you know, that basically the land use plan that you approve is what guides future zonings and what zoning classifications of property should be over time. So I don't have an enlargement of this, and again, this is in your map, but you have a future land use plan, both map and narrative. And you note that there's not much industrial land in the Town of Princeton, but what you do have in the Town of Princeton, which is industrial, which is kind of the bluish, purplish area here, is in fact the area right next to the port. So the problem actually is a good one for me, is that you've got a land use plan which is inconsistent with the zoning classification. So the application coming to you tonight is simply to take a piece of property that is not consistent with your land use plan and rezone it to industrial so that it is consistent with your land use plan. So because we have industrial property to the left and to the right, we had numerous discussions about how to proceed, and we're not going to extend the pit south of the Duke Energy Progress easement. You have high voltage transmission line easement running through the property. And it shows up on the aerial and shows up on this map and one I'll show you later when we get the special use permit. We're not going to extend the property to the south of that easement line. And you've also got some residential along Cornwallis Road on that area. And even though we are already storing some overburden there, we said we will split zone this property and leave everything to the south as its current R1 jurisdiction, but we will asked that, it was easy to split zone because it was already a surveyed line, which was the boundary of the easement. So it was easy to delineate exactly where the zoning line would be. So the area between the current industrial zone property to the east and the Barn Hill asphalt property to the west, both of which is zoned industrial, we like the area in between that is north of the power lines to also be zoned industrial. What this would allow us to do, if you were to approve this, would be for us to come back, hopefully in a few minutes, and ask you to approve a special use permit that would allow the expansion of the quarry on a quasi-judicial special use permit application hearing. We, as always, the case, it was important to reach out to our neighbors and folks in the area, make sure that they knew exactly what we were proposing. We sent, even before we filed the application, we sent this map and another map showing where the quarry pit expansion would be for all the neighbors that you would be notifying for this application. We had a community meeting on February 17th at your community building here in Princeton. We had 2 or 3 folks show up, and they were inquisitive and wanted to know more information. One of them, Mr. McKen Smith in South, noted that there had been significant flooding during Hurricane Matthew. Maybe it was Floyd. No, it was Floyd. There was significant flooding, and Mayor Raines already talked about some of the flooding because of culverts and so forth. After that flooding event, we lowered a spillway so that if there was another flooding event, another hurricane, the waters would not back up to Mr. Smith's property, but would in fact flow into the pit and avoid the flooding in this area. And then when the next hurricane came through, which I think was Matthew, there was no flooding because we had installed that spillway to channel the floodwaters from this area. So if we get to the special use permit tonight, you will see that we are committed to and are willing to condition the special use permit on maintaining that spillway at the same elevation and size as currently there to address the concern that was raised at the community meeting. So we, based upon a very successful community meeting, we're very pleased that we were able to address the concerns. We filed our application with that input that came to the March Planning Board meeting, and the Planning Board voted unanimously to recommend approval of the requested rezoning. Again, there'll be conditions to our special use permit, which I'll talk about later this evening at your meeting. But again, ultimately, as you well know, rezonings should follow your land use plan. This is an easy application, an easy argument for me to make, and we would greatly appreciate a favorable vote to rezone this inconsistent parcel to be consistent with your land use plan. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
If our zoning clerk, Ms. Williamson, will.
The planning board voted to recommend the rezoning request by Hanson Aggregate, stating it is consistent with the adopted land use plan. The public hearing has been advertised and posted on social media and the webpage. There is a sign on the property. The neighbor and property owners were notified, and the finding of facts are have been answered and are and meet all the requirements.
Okay. And any questions at this point?
You'll note in your packet, we provided not only the form, but our project narrative. We recognize that we have a number of criteria. We wanted to make sure in written form that we address every single one of the requirements of the ordinance. Yes, Mr. Ross?
Okay, you said that the current rock quarry wouldn't be viable much longer. Do you have a time frame on that?
You know, I would, sorry to say, I don't want to make sure I don't get misquoted because I'm not under oath right yet. You know, the life of the quarry is going to be a function of the demand. Right now, you have a lot of demand in the area. So, in our discussions with Johnson County about when we could start end of life reclamation to term this, I think, and Alan, we were talking about 10 to 12 years. Yeah, 10 to 12 years probably. It's interesting that the rezoning for Johnston County area, we were looking at basically a 100-year plan. So actually, in terms of quarry planning, 12 years is actually pretty quick, pretty soon. But we were looking 10 to 15 years and 12 being probably a good ballpark to guess how much more it would be commercially viable at the current pit location.
And so basically what's happening is you're talking about expanding to this new line we're talking about tonight. That would give you another 10 to 12 years in the current quarry that we could then turn into water storage. And all the work that's going on the other side of Rains Mill now that we see going on, that is in preparation for going ahead and starting to dig there relatively soon.
Long term,
Correct.
yes, that's
Correct. Yeah, what you're seeing along Range Mill and Old Cornwallis is we're starting to build the berms for the ultimate development.
Okay.
But that'll be, and I hope it didn't freak anybody out and thinking, oh my gosh, they're running over there right away. We're just starting to move material, but that will be a long process as we continue to mine the current pit.
before you start any pit, there are lots of state requirements, as well as now Johnston County requirements that they put on their approval of the special use permit for the additional pit across Rains Mill Road. Includes a lot of berm, a lot of landscaping. Everyone needs rock, but not necessarily everyone wants to see it being mined. Though if you would ever like to see the quarry operations, we would invite you to come. We're not hiding anything out there. It's the tension that some of us walk in, that we generally make sure that we're required by state law to landscape it, to berm it, to have a separation from roads and so forth. But we also don't want people to think we're hiding anything, and we want folks to know they're welcome to come out there anytime and see the operations, because we're quite proud of the operations that Jerry runs out there. And but that's a long-winded answer of kind of what we're looking at.
Okay. And the last question was the spillway you were talking about. Mr. Smith was worried about his property flooding. As far as enforcing that happens and it's kept up and not clogged up with other debris and everything, is that just kind of goodwill, or is that how do we
It has been goodwill up to this point. If you approve the special use permit tonight and you improve that condition in it, then you have enforcement rights over that. If it's in there, right now it's just goodwill.
Mm-hmm.
It's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
We try to make sure that we maintain good relations with our neighbors. So we've done it because we thought it was the right thing to do. But we are proposing in the special use permit that it be a condition, which would give enforcement mechanisms that you currently don't have.
Okay. That was it. Yeah.
Is any other questions? Anyone opposed to the zoning? I will comment that I was at the February meeting, and the meeting was very cordial with a lot of community. All the neighbors were invited to attend, as well as at our public hearing tonight. And if there were any questions, they're either answered that night or answered at a later point. So in our zoning ordinance, certainly back in the 80s, we had no zoning. And so as we move forward, zoning maps are important, but we need to follow the zoning maps. So this perhaps is a correction to that process. So if there is no more questions and related to the request for rezoning, we can start a conversation on what the special use permit would be. And we'll go in logical order. We have to do one before the other in terms of voting. But if you want to, if you want to start on that,
We got to be sworn in for that.
okay.
Would you like to be sworn in?
Does anybody want to swear anybody
I was
else?
supposed to swear before we got in, I didn't.
Anybody else wants to speak at that?
I tell you what, if you guys don't mind, I'll have my whole crew come up here. We'll be sworn in. That way, if you have a question, like you did last time, Mr. Burnett speaks, you'll already be sworn in.
We need a sign.
Okay, so I'll have them all signed, circulate. Okay.
And I'm gonna need a bag to read it.
All right, and then I'll take it
I
back.
don't have that memorized.
Okay.
You'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge? Do so by saying, "I do,"
I do.
and signing below.
I like that. Okay, try to keep this efficient. Speaking of keeping this efficient, it probably makes sense, you've got this 3 times on the agenda, it does affect 3 different properties. So you may want to vote 3 different times, but what I would ask is that, if I may, make one presentation and it be applicable to all 3 cases before you, even if you take votes up for the different properties, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
It is.
Okay. Secondly, in the interest of time, what I'll say for the record, because everything here is under oath, is that I'd like everything I just finished saying in the rezoning hearing to now be incorporated as evidence in the special use permit as if I repeated myself by reference. So that way, that keeps me from having to say everything I've just said, but I ask that you accept all the statements that I made in the rezoning hearing as sworn testimony now in support of the special use permit. So with that kind of introduction, as I said earlier, under your use table of your ordinance, mining operations occur on parcels that are zoned industrial and that have a special use permit for the extraction of minerals and rock aggregate from the ground. So therefore, we need to not only have, to expand the pit, we need to not only have the rezoning, we also need to have a special use permit. So therefore, this part is a quasi-judicial special use permit on 3 parcels. The first one, actually leave this one up, Aaron, if I will. So the 3 parcels are the currently zoned Barn Hill Contracting Asphalt Plant. They're going to continue to operate the asphalt plant there. And this will only become part of the quarry operations when and if they sell it to Hanson. We have a very close relationship with Barn Hill. We've talked to them. They are supporting this application. They signed the application as the landowner, but they understand that it's just going to be an overlay if and when they ever sell it. Then Hanson could potentially use that for mining operations. And then the parcel that's before you tonight is the rezoning, and the parcel that is currently being used as an existing shop for the quarry operations. For a special use permit, it's a little different hearing, as you well know. You have specific criteria that I have to present evidence on to demonstrate compliance with your ordinance. And I found probably the easiest way to do a special use permit hearing is just to kind of go through those criteria and tell you how we have presented, met those, that criteria through our written application, and the testimony of the folks that are behind me, if they were, that can confirm everything that I'm saying here, if questions were asked of them. The first criteria is the proposed use or structure is permitted as a special use in the district in which it is located. And as I discussed earlier, the reason for the rezoning is so that it would be zoned industrial so that we can comply with the first requirement. Once it is zoned industrial, then the first requirement will be met because it is permitted as a special use in industrial zone property. The second criteria is that the use as proposed complies with all requirements of the zoning ordinance and applicable federal, state, and local laws, and with all conditions. That's a particularly easy one to, well, both easy and onerous for us to require because quarries are extremely regulated by the state. So the DEQ has an entire division called the Land Resources Division of the Department of Environmental Quality that heavily regulates everything that goes on out there. So because of that regulation, we have to comply with all that because the state has the power to shut us down, quite frankly. And B, because we do have to comply with all that, means that we meet B of your special use permit criteria as well. C, the proposed use and development does not endanger the public health, safety, and welfare. As I spoke earlier, this is highly regulated by the Division of Energy, Mineral, and Land Resources. And the purpose of those state regulations, is to ensure protection of the public health, safety, and welfare. As a practical matter, we've operated at this location now for 45 years, and we are extremely proud of the safety record we have out there, the fact that we have been a good corporate citizen to your construction industry in this part of the county and the town, to the employees that work out there. And so, given this isn't a new use that you have to speculate, well, will they operate in a responsible manner, not to endanger public health, safety, and welfare? Our track record speaks for itself. And given the regulations that we have to meet, we satisfy criteria C of your special use permit section of the ordinance. D is where, so you sometimes get a lot of evidence, and I'll try to make this as succinct as possible. I've had special use permit public hearings going for hours on this criteria, and I don't want to do that tonight because we've got a basketball game to watch. So the proposed use does not injure the value of adjoining or abutting property. What we did is we had Kirkland appraisers. Rich Kirkland is an MAI appraiser to provide this analysis in addressing criteria D here. And let me try to walk through this as quickly as possible. And you probably don't want me to read all 91 pages. So at the bottom of the first page, at the very beginning of the cover page, is his conclusion that he restates. I therefore conclude that the quarry expansion where located as designed and as proposed to be operated will be in unity and harmony with the surrounding area and will maintain the value of adjoining adjacent property. Let me then have you flip to the very end. The very, very end, let's label page 92. And I just want to highlight Mr. Kirkland's credentials as an MAI appraiser with certifications in North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, and various continuing education courses he's taken as an appraiser. What Rich did, and he did this, and I will tell you, he didn't do it just for, I hope you don't take offense, he didn't do it just for you. He did it 3 years ago for Johnston County. We said, Mr. Kirkland, we want you to look at 9 quarries in this part of the state. And we want you to look at the sales and resales of property in neighborhoods near quarries and sales and resales in neighborhoods further from quarries, and see if you can tell and see whether there is an appreciable difference. So Mr. Kirkland looked at 9 different quarries, and again, I'm not going to read it all to you, but starting on page 7, he looked at the Martin Marietta Quarry in Benson. Starting on page 12, he looked at the Hanson Aggregates Quarry in Holly Springs in Wake County. Starting on page 23, he looked at the Wake Stone Quarry, which some of you may be familiar with, 64 in Knightdale. Starting on page 33, he looked at the Martin Marietta Quarry in Garner. Starting on page 39, he looked at the Hanson Aggregates Quarry.
Just 1 second. Note that it's 7:50, the first public hearing is closed.
You got to continue, or you want to?
Yeah, we can continue.
I looked at the Hanson Aggregates Quarry in Wake Forest. Then starting on page 50, he looked at the Hanson Aggregates Quarry on Crabtree Creek in Raleigh. Starting on page 63, the Martin Marietta Quarry in Fountain. Starting on page 68, the Martin Marietta Quarry in Fuquay Varina. And then starting on page 78, he looked at the quarry in Sims. And he also then looked at the MLS records of sales and resales of properties that were close to quarries and further away from quarries. And concluded that, because quarries are burned and landscaped and subject to all these state regulations, that there was no difference in the value of houses closer to and further away from quarries, and the appreciation of those houses did not change over time when he looked at sales and resales. So, you know, the state law talks about there being data to support an opinion. So this report from Mr. Kirkland is the data that he looked at, and then I went back to him this year in anticipation of tonight's hearing and said, is there anything which changes your opinion? Would you go back out and look at the area, and then would you update your opinion for the Princeton Town Council and provide your expert opinion and a report to the Town Council that can be submitted into evidence? So what you have is Mr. Kirkland's report with the data behind it that leads him to reach the conclusion that's there at the bottom of the very first page, and then as also repeated at the end of the report on page 90. So that is the evidence that we are presenting. You know, the other reality here, and this is what the folks said at the community meeting that Mayor Raines was at, is that the quarry's been there. You know, they know what to expect. They know what it's like. And it was there before they were. And so therefore they're not concerned about a fairly moderate expansion to the southwest. So with Mr. Kirkland's report presented the evidence, and with the both the data and the fact that the quarry is pre-existing, this isn't a new use, we ask that you find that criteria number D be satisfied.
Can I ask one quick question while we're on that?
Certainly, yeah.
Just noting the second public hearing is closed. Go ahead.
So noted.
In the conclusion, I was reading, you know, it has kind of given us a good idea that there is no overall bad effect to the property value. Was there any specific, like even one specific, because since we hadn't had time to review it, was there?
There's really, I mean, obviously you look at all these properties and you try to find from a statistically significant sample whether there's any trends. And then you also look at specific factors starting on page 89. And really, you know, he said if you are within 100 or 200 feet, then, you know, there can be some of these considerations. But the good news here is that there's no house within 600 feet of the expanded area. So only do you start seeing concerns, people having concerns, and basically it's a stigma concern if you're within, I think, the first 125, 150 feet. Once you get beyond that, you know, there was really no trend lines that he saw beyond that. You know, folks are concerned about the things that are regulated, like noise, like dust and odor. And dust is something that they're very regulated by. And Mr. Garvey's very familiar with the dust. We have a dust plan with Johnston County. The state looks at dust and emissions. Because of those regulations that they're subject to by the state, there really isn't, once you get out of the 125, 150 foot radius from the wall of the quarry, there really hasn't been anything that showed up.
And just to note, we are in a findings of facts, so expert witnesses are ones that are addressing your questions pertinent to that.
Absolutely.
But it has to stay on that findings of facts.
Sure. Correct. Then item E, the proposed use will be adequately served by and will not impose undue burdens on the public utilities and infrastructure. And again, the good news is we're not talking about a new use. We're talking about an existing use, and the existing infrastructure will not need to be increased. It will not need to be expanded. The quarry will continue to operate as a function of demand and not the size of the quarry. And what has been provided has worked well up to this point. So criteria E is satisfied. Criteria F, the site and operation of the proposed use is compatible with existing uses and other allowable uses in the surrounding neighborhood. We talked about Mr. Kirkland's opinion about the level of regulation by the state, about the fact that it's been there for 45 years. actually some of the neighbors said at the community meeting, well, we live in the neighborhood of the quarry. And that, that is our neighborhood, is to have a quarry, and there's not a lot of houses around it. And, as a practical matter, that's the nature of the neighborhood as it has existed and will continue to exist, and this doesn't really change that. And then and then criteria G, the proposed use conforms to the adopted comprehensive plan. I talked about that in the context of rezoning and in the land use plan maps I handed out, that it is not only consistent, but is actually exactly where you would want your industrial uses. And your text of your land use plan actually talks about this. And on page 33, and this is quoted on page 6 of our narrative, in which your land use plan said there is relatively little purely industrial land use anticipated in Princeton. The one major exception to this is the area around Hanson Aggregates Quarry, including the Barn Hill construction property. Uses in this area are expected to remain as mining, quarrying, and related industries. So it's nice that you actually have a land use plan which specifically contemplates the use that we are coming before you tonight and requesting the special use permit. We do have some conditions that we proposed in our application. If you look on our narrative, that's part of your packet, those conditions really are 5, and they're on page 7 of our narrative. And if you want to put up the next map, Aaron, what we want to do is make sure it is clear that the quarry pit stays within this red line here. That obviously you've got the easement, but you've also, we will make sure there's no quarrying and no mining activity in this triangle here, because you do have some houses down here, and we'll maintain a 50-foot separation from the pit to the easement. So I think there's a 100-foot wide easement, which means you have 150 feet from the closest possible. And again, this isn't going to happen overnight. Over the next 12 years, it will slowly be moving. And that we maintain these buffers and buffers along here, along Rains Mill Road, that are consistent with the Johnston County enforced buffers north on Rains Mill Road. So the conditions that we're proposing is that we maintain that 50-foot buffer on the north side of the power line easement, that we maintain the vegetated buffer in the triangular area north of the power easement and south of Barn Hills property, that will maintain and install a 50-foot buffer along Rains Mill Road, north-south is shown on that will maintain a spillway into the pit with approximately the same elevation or lower and capacity or greater as the current spillway to manage floodwaters on the south side of the pit as in the past. That's what you would now have enforcement mechanism, because it would be in the special use permit. And that we will remain compliant with all Department of Environmental Quality, Energy, Mineral, and Land Resource Division state mining permit requirements. So those are the 5 conditions that we propose that you place on us. And with those 5 conditions and with the evidence that's presented in our application and the expert report by Mr. Rich Kirkland, I believe we've met all of the requirements of your special use permit ordinance, and we would greatly appreciate your approving our application for all 3 properties this evening. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
The water that enters the spillway is pumped to the Little River, is that right?
So anytime, so there's always water in the pit.
Mm-hmm.
There's always some leakage, and it is treated. And someone wanted to talk briefly about, how it is treated and then discharge with your discharge permit, Jack?
Okay, well,
Hey, you want to introduce yourself for the record?
I'm Jack Garvey, Environmental Manager with Hanson for the North Carolina operations. The water that backed up on Ken Smith's property came from Old Cornwallis Road, from a tributary off of Old Cornwallis Road. It's not pumped, but if it should go into the pit, so it doesn't, as a spillway, so it doesn't back up.
Mm-hmm.
Now that water will be pumped afterwards, once it's in the pit. It'll be pumped back into the water system, which eventually drains out by gravity into the river.
And you have-
From a single discharge from our plant.
And you have a discharge permit from DEQ.
We do have a discharge permit for that water.
And that
We
water has-
sample, we monitor quarterly, and, well, we monitor and everything's fine.
And there's sediment ponds, so that, and the DEQ has opacity, clarity limits that we have to meet prior to discharge. So often the actual water that's coming out of our sediment ponds in the river permit is actually usually clearer than what's in the river itself.
How often are samples actually sent in on the water?
Quarterly,
Quarter?
yeah.
Okay.
It's per the permit requirements. Good questions. Again, and the spillway is really a hurricane event. I mean, as a practical matter, afternoon thunderstorms, typical rain, it's not an issue. But after Floyd, we thought it would be a nice stopgap, since you had this huge hole in the ground. And there's going to be water in the pit anyway, because the water is flowing into the pit, it falls in the pit, it's got to be discharged and treated. So we thought as an accommodation to address flooding that occurs everywhere during hurricanes, at least we can alleviate from this tributary.
That's your question, because I've never been over to the quarry, but how deep is the pit?
Yeah, no, again, let the experts, someone want to give us a ballpark?
I'd say roughly 310 feet.
And again, we really would extend invitations to anyone who'd like to see the operations. It's actually pretty impressive, and we're proud of it.
It's neat.
But- And at different heights at different points, there's steps down, so at different points, there's a different height from the top, so it's not a 310-foot sheer drop, because you have what's called benches. But from probably the undisturbed ground elevation to the lowest point
Right.
is at 300 feet. But, good. And again, we would invite you to contact Jerry, and he'd be glad to give you a tour.
Is there any additional person that's been sworn in wants to speak as part of the hearing for or against the special use permit?
We're not aware of anyone. Again, they're all willing and able to, but we have them here to answer questions, such as the one about the water. Jack, you earned your keep tonight.
Any additional questions for the finding of fact? We may come back to the finding of fact
Sure.
after we conclude the public hearing aspects. So the first public hearing is the annexation public hearing. Is there any additional questions the town board has pertaining to the Princeton Church of God, the 26.45 acres? Again, I'll reinstate that the current church structure is inside the town. We're just expanding the town limits for additional structures that may be built there in the future. So if there's no more questions, is there a motion to?
Mr. Mayor, everything that the church has proposed is in line with what you would expect to be next to a church. They're just carrying on ministry in several different ways. So I really see no reason that the application should not be passed. And with that being said, that I make the motion that we do approve the application. I second that motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Martin, second by Commissioner Robinson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, motion is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there may be something to discuss later that may affect your annexation. So, next is the public hearing for rezoning for Hanson Aggregate Southeast, the Rains Mill Road. So we had a presentation and evidence that actually we're following our land use plan if we change the zoning, and which is probably a technical correction. So,
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion, we accept and adopt this request for zoning change. We worked on this land use update a few years ago, and I remember specifically we were talking about the quarry as being an industrial area, so I see no need that we not do anything but approve.
Yeah, at both ends of the property, that's industrial at both ends. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that they want the middle to look like the rest. That's probably about the only way that they can take care of business that they need to. So I'll second that motion.
motion made by Commissioner Rose, seconded by Commissioner Martin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, motion is unanimous. And next is to consider the special use permit. And this is a finding of fact, which was laid before you. So if there's any discussion or further questions on the findings of fact.
No questions, and let me say this about Hanson. And I've been on the board since '99, and Hanson has come before the board several times. Whenever they came at first, I always thought, that these guys, you got the big trucks, you got the rocks, that they blowing stuff up somewhere, and thinking in my head that, that there's a lot going on that they probably don't want people to know about. But I found just the opposite. That they have came in from day one and they explained to the people what they did, how did they do it, and it's basically laid out for you. And if you're going to make a presentation to me, that I think people ought to follow what Hanson regularly does. If there's no further
And
questions,
the public hearings. Perfect time.
okay, that I'm ready to make a motion and a finding of fact on this matter.
In favor, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So there's been a
And you
motion.
can make one motion for all three, properties.
Yes.
But it'll be recorded in the minutes individually.
Yes, we'll do just that.
Okay, motion is made for the finding of fact to approve all three parcels, Edwards Road, Rains Mill Road, and off Rains Mill Road, and finding of fact for the special use permit.
And
Be favorable.
I think we actually have to state what the finding of fact is. And so I'll state that the finding of fact that the proposed use of structure is permitted as a special use in the district in which it is located. Secondly, that the proposed use and development does not endanger the public health, safety, and welfare. Third, that the proposed use does not injure the value of the adjoining or abutting properties, that the proposed use will be adequately served by and will not impose undue burdens on public utilities and infrastructure, and that the site and operation of the proposed use is compatible with existing uses and other allowable uses in the surrounding neighborhood, and that the proposed use conforms to the adopted comprehensive plan.
Motion's been made, in favor.
Would you like to impose any conditions on that?
Yes, and that we also include the special conditions 1 through 5 that Hanson has outlaid in the document.
Motion's been made. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I would like to say that every time I've had to deal with Hanson, as Commissioner Martin said, they've been very upfront. I did get to go on a tour a few years ago. I advise if you go, take some boots that you don't mind getting muddy. It's going to be dirty. So anyway, but go, and it looks like the Grand Canyon is right over there. It's crazy. Yeah.
After no further discussion, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? And I wanted to save my comments after the finding of fact, because during findings of fact, you're not supposed to have a lot of commentary. But Hanson is a true partner of our community. Every time we ask them to help us with projects, they've been more than willing. The community building is just an example of that, with the football field enhancements. I think that was somewhere close to $200,000 of aggregates that are on the football field. And the fire department needed some reconstruction of their facility. Community Day, you've always been a participant. And frankly, if we're going to do I-42 from Raleigh to the coast, Hanson is going to be a partner with NCDOT for that project. And as Princeton grows, Hanson will grow because we need foundations for houses and got to use aggregates for that. So thank y'all, and we look forward to continue this partnership.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Mayor, as a private citizen and a business owner locally, I've never heard any negative, and I have family that backs up to their property, but I've never heard any negative comments towards their company, so congratulations.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith attends my church, and I remember when his property flooded, and during Florence, there was no flood. So, thank you guys.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Matthew, Mike, may get there in time.
We're good.
All the way to Rome.
Yes, please.
Well, but we can go right behind you.
I know there's some more UNC fans here, so.
We'll go ahead and make our exit, let you get on with the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No, and the area trustees is partner with
There's one at the other.
We're not through yet.
Perhaps I have skipped persons to be heard. Is there anyone here that wants to
I think you're
speak?
right in that crowd that just went.
Okay. I will, Draper Aiden, if we have a representative from Draper Aiden that wants to address two other items that's on our agenda.
Mayor, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to stand before you. I'm Dr. Stephen Gandy. I'm Chief Engineer for Draper Aid and Associates, and a few weeks ago I was contacted by Ms. Ashford. I came up here, had a meeting with her and Mr. Dickey Rasbell, is that? And discussed a sewer extension that the county's looked at for some time. We put together a cost proposal for what we think it would take to evaluate that, the limits that could be reached, the sewer line, the different methods that it could be done, the various permits, the things that would need to be obtained, and the feasibility overall of it. Do we do these one at a time?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell about our assumption about the wastewater treatment plant too?
Well, you know, we are under a moratorium currently, not allowed to add any more capacity or add any customers, line extensions and things like that to the wastewater treatment plant. We are also looking at a study with respect to that to see what it would take to increase dramatically the capacity of the existing plant or the feasibility to build an additional plant at another location in the town with a separate discharge point. All that would have to coincide and be done prior to extending the sewer line extension unless Public Water Supply, Department of Water Infrastructure would grant us a dispensation specifically for that line. In the past, I know my counterpart, Tyrus Clayton, has had success in dealing with them and getting specific additions to the sewer system added, even though we were under a moratorium. That could be explored if that's the intent.
With these two proposals, we're assuming we're gonna work it all out
Yes.
and have capacity.
You know, that is not going to go away. It has to be done. I think that the people with the state understand that. We would have to work with them through the search grant to figure out the best method, the most environmentally safe and the most cost-effective method to provide an expansion or capacity to your existing wastewater utility.
Well, and I'll add a comment. We've had several property owners, as well as the expansion of the services that Princeton Church of God is desiring to offer that will need sewer in that area.
Yes, sir.
And assumptions are not good in business or in
Yes, sir.
town government, but if with Pine Level being served by Johnston County has a moratorium on expansion of services in the Pine Level area. If our sewer line does grow towards Pine Level, and we look at, we currently have a 275,000 capacity. If we're adding 1 million additional capacity, whatever our grant application is for USDA funding and approval with DEQ,
Yes, sir.
we would have enough capacity to service a significant area of eastern Johnston County.
Absolutely, and that kind of transitions into the second proposal, which would provide a cost estimate and a feasibility study to bring a force main from Pine Level to the town of Princeton for you to be able to treat that specific volume of wastewater. Yes, sir. We're talking about volumes and just, you know, things like that, and expanding your plant. I think that one of the recommendations I would go with would be seriously consider something slightly less than 1 million gallons. 1 million gallons, you get into another set of regulations, which makes things a good bit more complicated. 990,000 gallons is just about as good and puts you in a better situation.
Yeah, and Mike Rose may add to this, but with this, if we had the study done, there may be funds from the General Assembly or other funds that could assist in paying for this project. Do you want to add some of your conversation?
Well, it was strictly off the record conversation, but I do believe that we have the ability to move forward with some funds if this project goes.
And there are multiple resources that we can tap into.
The ARPA money is going around now, that's one thing, but there are certainly grants through the Division of Infrastructure, also in the USDA that make that.
But I've learned through my years as working in government, not only the Town of Princeton, but Triangle J Council and government. If you have a plan, it's easier to get funding than to say, well, we'll do such and such. I said, well, where's your plan? And we don't have one.
Yes, sir.
So,
My question is this, on this particular project, we absolutely need more sewer capacity and we need to do it as swiftly as possible.
Yes, sir.
But for this $10,000, from what it looks as though it's just for a memo that will give us an estimate of the cost. It doesn't really get any engineering, any work at all.
We would also produce a map that would show line sizes, a particular pump station where it would be placed. That it's not simply just the cost estimate, but we would include maps and those sorts of things with it as well. Yes, sir. It's not full design. I don't want to make you believe that we could design it for that.
And does that then kind of basically come off the cost of the next because there's some preliminary already done? I mean,
Well, yes, sir.
Kind of.
It would make the design, yes, sir, less expensive when we got to that point. Yes, sir.
And may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
What's your time frame? I think maybe 30 days for reporting back on this study if they approve it?
I think we could, if we approve it today, I think we're looking at somewhere in the end of May. Yes, sir.
End of May.
The end of May, something like that.
Well, I would like to say there's importance of a date by May 15th when it comes to legislative conversations. And also, how much longer, if they move forward, how much longer than that does it take to get design plans?
I would think we could get it done by the May 15th deadline.
You're just talking about
The cost proposal.
Proposal, yeah.
Design,
is that 2 months, 2 years?
I think 2 months is a good estimate on that. And then permitting, I don't control the state. Sometimes you turn it over to them and you're kind of at their mercy. You can call them every day, which I have done in some cases to try to get a reply. But once you submit plans to them, you're kind of at their mercy and you lay a reply.
And one last question, if I may. At what phase can you determine what type of budget it would require to develop the plans if they so chose to do so?
Well, once we get the cost estimate, we determine, first, there's two possibilities there. That receiving pump station across from the creek, very, very deep. It's about 35 feet deep, solid rock. So a lot of people talk.
This is Martin Livestock?
Yes, sir. A lot of people talk about, your minimum grade, maximum depth. Cutting through that much rock is extremely expensive. I looked at it for about an hour, sitting here talking with Marla, and thought, that's one possibility. Dickey had looked at that too. There's also the possibility of doing a localized collection to a manhole out here near 70, and then pumping through a force main at 3 foot depth where we would have to cut through rock right to that other manhole. We should know at the end of that what the budget would be for construction, yes, sir. Once that determination is made.
At the end of this study?
Yes, sir.
And obviously, we need to have a upgrade to our sewer treatment plant, or so it all goes hand in hand.
Yes, sir.
Unless he got some type of special permit to take on some volume additional without the whole 900.
What we could do is prove that we eliminated certain inflow and infiltration volumes and offset that. That was the last special consideration they gave us. And estimate, we fixed this leak, we fixed this inflow, approximately how much a month did that add to it? Then show them that reduction, and then hopefully they would allow us to have that.
Chad, how are our numbers looking once we fix that big ditch hole?
Well, the past few months has been pretty good, but luckily not had that much rain,
Mhm.
you know, so, it's kinda hard to tell. We're averaging 150,000 a day, 150,000, 175,000 a day now. But it's moderately dry, you
Mhm.
know, so.
On behalf of the church, I would like to just tell the board, we have extreme high interest in seeing if, funds can be pulled together, the town supports and getting it to the church. And then as a property owner, in between wherever the start and end is, I think there's interest in the development property owners, if it requires over and above state funds, some type of participation, that might be very possible too from anybody that's in the development role, since some of that land has changed hands going up Martin Livestock and then I guess on the south side of 70 between Martin Livestock and the church, so.
We won't know that until we get a cost.
Sure, right, and we're gonna try to prepare in the civil part of the plan if we go forward to make all the preparations in case we're able to have this service.
So there's actually another proposal, you can go over that. If we adopt it, we need to adopt them separately because they're, in the second proposal, Marlo has talked to high level, and we'll discuss that after that presentation.
The second proposal would be to look at what a force main would cost and its practicality to bring from Pine Level to here to Princeton. There's a few obstacles in between here and there. I briefly got the car on the way back from a meeting and rode that. There's a railroad over there that I would stay away from like the plague. And there's a lot of road crossings, a few creek crossings and things like that. Those all need to be considered. Those are your high cost items, the things that require the longest time in permitting. That one I don't think could be completed in a couple of months for design. We could do the cost estimate, of course, rather rapidly, the feasibility, but the design of that will take a little time.
Well, and in speaking for the 12B, it is true, as we've heard in the other presentation, we do not have significant industrial parks east of I-95. We know that interstate highway is going down between I-95 will be I-42 towards Wayne County. And if we have infrastructure somewhere near that interstate highway, there would be more opportunities for industry to be locating in eastern Johnston County. And we need to be planning in that direction. So, Marla, if you want to comment about the Pine Levels situation and what the mayor had stated.
Mayor Holt said that he is interested in the feasibility study for sewer how to get sewer from Pine Level to Princeton, and that he feels that they should definitely participate in the paying for the feasibility study on a 50-50 basis, and he's going to present it to his board on April the 11th.
And so the way I look at it with the Pine Level extension, if we're talking about that, we are really should talk about getting right much capacity, because we're basically be going into the sewage business at a new level, correct?
Right, that's why we're talking about closer to $1 million instead of doubling our current capacity.
And once the study is done, we would need to discuss interlocal agreements and you know, but at least we have figures to talk about.
Well, the, it cost us $20,000 to make a decision about the future of Princeton. And the same thing that I said at our planning meeting, that everything that we dreaming about and everything we're talking about, what these different companies that who are building subdivisions and planning for this and that, they're banking on us having capacity. Because if we don't at least see how much it costs, whether or not we can afford to do it, that if we aren't able to get estimates on that, then we aren't gonna be able to go anywhere.
I'd be interested in if they're possible, and unless there's a reason not to table the fund level until they have their meeting to make sure that they're on board with going in and half on that. And unless there's a reason why we have to do it tonight, I think we're much more pressed.
Well, now, let me kind of urge you a little bit different way.
Okay.
Because we can still vote and make it,
Contingent.
yeah.
Mhm.
Because we do kind of need to move along too.
That would be proper to make it contingent on them
Yeah.
paying 50% of the cost.
Yeah.
We do have a meeting on the 18th, which is a week after their 11th meeting.
Right. Or the,
Let's move on 12A first, if there is, and separate it as two different items.
that I was just gonna ask if either one of the other commissioners had any input.
You basically stated what I was thinking. I think it needs to be a conditional approval that we get participation from them, because if they decide they don't want to do it, we have really no reason to do it at this point.
I agree.
Okay.
So is there a motion to pass 12A as drafted?
Just, where does this money, the potential 15,000 come from?
I thought it was 10.
Well, 10, and then if they go in, there'd be 15 total,
Oh, okay.
because Pine Level will be kicking in 5.
There are several options. We have money, already allocated for some engineering in our water and sewer fund. Not $15,000, but several thousand usually. And I don't believe we tapped into very much of it this year. We could also allocate ARPA money to pay for it. And we can appropriate fund balance from the water and sewer fund to pay for it. Or there may just be excess funds in the water and sewer fund before the end of the year that will pay for it.
So you
Because
don't,
we've had excess funds in
You
the
don't
last
feel
several
like-
years. There's not a tax on our budget at all.
you don't feel like it's a problem?
No.
Okay.
The best decision to make on how to pay for it, wait till June and see if we can just do it in our regular funds or if we need to appropriate something from somewhere else.
Mhm.
Basically, there is funds available, we will determine where
Where it comes from.
Yeah, and I would say if we do go forward with 12A, I'd like to kind of urge Draper Aiden, it says within 30 days of receipt, so that would be,
That's standard language. Yes, sir, I understand.
I got, so instead of end of May, that would be the 1st of May, yeah.
Motion's out there, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so you want to amend the proposal to have it to us by May 15th? Is that what your intent is?
Well, it says that
It
once
says
they
within
get,
30
once we
days.
sign it,
Okay.
they'll get it to us in 30 days.
That's, I just wanted to hold them to the 30 days and not the end of May.
This motion made, is there a second to the
Is the motion for 12A? Okay,
12A.
okay, all right.
There it is. Motion is seconded by Commissioner Holmes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And then 12B, I think there's some discussion of it being contingent on high level paying 50% of the cost of the study, and we'll know by the April 18th meeting if that has been concurred.
Did I make that as a motion, Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Martin has made a motion that we move forward on 12B, contingent on high level paying 50% of the cost of the study. Is there a second?
Yes.
Second by Commissioner Holmes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, motion is unanimous.
The only, I didn't get a chance to say this, but if we're at 250, that's our permit now, right? 250, 275. If we take on another town and the 500 or 600 proposed homes that it could be in our area and I-42 development, I really don't think $1 million is even going to touch it. Just.
Well, one of our
that's-
discussions were designing a plant that's expandable,
Okay.
because it's not gonna happen in 5 to 10 years. It's gonna take longer than
Okay.
that.
You just simply don't have the footprints for the existing plant to increase it much more than what you have. You
Okay.
require some property near there, but the little creek it discharges to won't take it anymore.
Gotcha.
So there's a couple things we could reduce the limits to solo. We'd have to have space age technology to get it down. That's not easy to do. As part of the study, we intend to do, we'll look at all of those options.
Another factor is that Johnston County is looking at a regional system that may be expanded east of I-95, but unfortunately, that may be 5 years down the road. And we don't want to be held hostage by another facility, and we want to ride our own train.
Can we pump it to the rock quarry?
I don't think that's going to be a water source for that.
Maybe in 12 to 15.
Yes.
I know you can pump it the whole pond.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't think that would work either. I don't think we got permits for that as well.
Let me say thank y'all to guys. We appreciate y'all considering doing that, because I really think that without a whole lot of hoop jumping, that if he gets us something that's, reasonable, that we can get a long way down the road with some help out of Raleigh. So.
Well, we've had help in Raleigh, and most appreciative of John Bell for helping in our $750,000 for flood, $200,000 for a water line, and $250,000 for our community building, $500,000 for our community building. So there's excess funds in our state budget, and community grants are very
They're gonna
important.
spend them on something.
Yeah.
Might not hit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank y'all for considering that. I believe that'd be a big help.
Thank you, guys.
Thank y'all. Appreciate your support.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
All right, there, young man.
Thank you all.
Yes, sir. No, I'm gonna take the lead. Good to see you.
Is that one of the personal privilege?
Personal privilege.
It is indeed.
Yes, I'll take it too.
Yes.
Oh, yeah?
I did
catch that.
Yeah,
Uh,
he introduced himself as Dr. Steve.
You're not under any time constraint, but,
I don't want to mislead you, so I'm gonna try to be quick. Let's,
God bless you.
before, as I'm going over some things, just to save some time, if there's anything in the, like the monthly, activity log events sheet, if there's anything you see next to me, you have questions, let me know. But I first want to give a recruitment report of the progress, whether it be positive progress or a continuation, I guess, just to kind of let you know where we are. In regards to recruitment, from February 23rd, 2022 through March 31st, 2022, we have made contact with 28 potential candidates. Candidates were invited to apply for the police officer position after review of their resumes on Indeed, which I want to add, we do have the ability to go on to Indeed, and he can reach out to applicants if the information on their resumes fit the requirements that we have to move further in the process. Of the 28 candidates, only 5 indicated that they were interested in the position. Out of these 5, only 1 followed up and an interview was conducted. After review of this applicant's background, it was determined that he would not continue in the hiring process. There was that particular applicant worked with another agency, and there was some inappropriate and illegal police behavior that caused a big issue. So we could move further on that. There have been approximately 4 potential applicants who expressed a word of mouth interest, but they have failed to produce the relevant documentation to initiate the application process. There was another individual who formerly was a deputy with the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. I spoke to him on 2 occasions. He just wanted us to hold his certification, and we don't do that simply because I've had several people in the past ask, could we hold their certification? Either they were about to lose their certification, it was about to expire, or they just didn't want to work. They just kind of wanted to hold on to it so they don't lose it. And then if they lost it and it expired, then we have to go back through basic law enforcement training again. So to avoid that, most people that are already sworn, well, certified as a law enforcement official, they're, they just kind of want to hold on to their certification and not really work. So when I spoke to this individual, I told him that I would, I would definitely be interested, but I do require, some involvement on his end. And that is at least 1 or 2 shifts a month, which is what I require with our other part-timers. He had to speak to his wife. I didn't hear back from him at all. The last thing I heard, he was supposed to be filling out some relevant information and forms from training standards, which is an F3. I never received and never heard back from him, but then Officer Toole advised me that he declined and decided to be a reserve deputy with the sheriff's office. I don't know what their requirements are as far as how active their reserve deputy is supposed to be, but that was the decision he made. So we have one individual that inquired. He's a detention officer at Wayne County Sheriff's Office, but he's not a sworn deputy. He works in detention. So the mayor and Marla and I, we kind of discussed what the logistics are if there was an option of allowing people that were interested in working here to send them to school and pay them yearly, or pay them a salary. I have reached out to other agencies through the association just to see what their process is, because it is a process. Most of your agencies, your larger agencies, like the sheriff's office, like larger PDs, they will pay for them to go to school, but that's all they're doing. All they're doing is going to school. They don't work at all, simply because they want them to be focused on class, because it is a intense class that you have to take, and most of the time you need to be focused just on that. But that's pretty much where we are right now. Up to date, that's where we are. I haven't received any calls as of the last few days, and two hasn't received any calls or had any contact with any applicants either. But we're still trying to come up with some creative ways to attract some applicants. It's not the easiest process. We are still using our platforms. Marl and I had talked about the league at one point. I think there is a cost to that. But what we're trying to do is find platforms that just regular officers would look at, that they would search for jobs. Some platforms, like the league, some like the North Carolina Association of Chiefs of Police, most of your police officers at their level, they don't look on those type of platforms for job openings or vacancies. So I'm trying to explore some other platforms through the association, through some of my colleagues, to see if there's anything that I miss, any other platforms that we can use to advertise in. Anyone have any questions?
The ones that have reached out to you, and at a later date have just lost interest, and they said why?
They didn't. Unfortunately, some of them just won't follow through. And what I'm finding about some applicants is, if they're really interested, if they really need a job, they'll reach out to you. I don't know, they didn't say. We had an applicant, I think at the very beginning, I think shortly after the 23rd, who set a date to come in and speak with us to have an initial interview, and he called and said that he had some sickness in the family, and he didn't say anything else. And so, that's kind of where it left us. And unfortunately, I know we're at a point to where we might not get the cream of the crop, but we don't want, and I hate to say it, the bottom of the barrel type applicants, where you just taking what you can get. And sometimes that's what you're getting in some of the applicants. They're showing an initial interest, but then in the middle part of that process, then just kind of fail to get in all the documents. So unfortunately, if they're not getting in all the documents that we need to properly vet them and get through the background process, then it just kind of makes me wonder, how much quality is within that applicant, if the applicant was to go through the process and actually get hired. But we do reach out, and unfortunately, I just don't feel like we should have to chase them down 3 or 4 times and call them several times. I mean, we do reach out to them, we do follow-up calls. There was another individual that worked for GPD. I don't want to call any names, but I reached out to him twice. Didn't hear anything back from him. And sometimes you might encounter some applicants that might express, if you let them know that we have openings, that they might be interested. I don't know if it's just a polite way of saying, okay, sure, I might be interested. But, there's a strong possibility it's just being kind and not following through. But we do all we can to try to select, applicants and try to respond back to them, even trying to reach out to them. And so we haven't waited for applicants to contact us. Tool actually reached out to them based on the information that was on their resumes.
Are we doing anything trying to recruit any part-timers with the increased pay, like just actually checking with other police agencies around here to see so we don't have any coverage gaps?
Well, I haven't checked with any other police departments that I haven't done. I mean, we've got some part-timers that work for Dunn. Well, we got 2 actually that work for Dunn. You've got some local departments which are in the surrounding areas like Pine Level. We have, matter of fact, the chief and one of the other officers that are part-time here. So we actually have a part-timer that works for Kinley. and he's been part-time here for a little while. So outside of those, we don't have any other part-timers. But I haven't reached out to the sheriff's office because they won't allow them to work part-time. And, you know, I'm not sure about Smithfield. I haven't reached out to them as far as them working part-time. Because some of your larger agencies, they're very particular about their officers working, you know, outside of their employment with that town. But I haven't reached back out to anybody beyond them, though.
I would encourage you to do that because that may fill some gaps that until we actually recruit the right full-time candidates, that we do have other resources.
I can contact the chiefs, because that's where you can start, and ask the chiefs if they were open to that, if they were minded, if, you know, we sent some information over there, or he spoke to his officers about it, and at that point, see if they're interested, because ultimately, it's gonna be up to the agency head whether or not he allows it. And if he does, and they're open to it, I'm definitely open to it. Because I'm always open to part-time, not just full-time, but anybody that wants to work part-time as well, I'm open to that.
We've done some 30-mile radius, anywhere in the 30-mile radius, that's includes Wilson and.
It does. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Any questions about the recruitment before I move a little further? So in your packet, I have a general orders, uniforms, equipment, and appearance, and I have a copy of that actual sheet out of the standard operating procedure policy. And the recent board meeting, the board agreed to amend the grooming standard, but we still have to change the narrative or delete the language, amend the actual policy. So that's why I included that in there, and I highlighted the actual wording in the policy that needs to be deleted, and I've actually included a sheet behind that one with the actual wording that needs to be replaced. So the highlighted version says the face will be kept clean shaven with the exception of the mustache, which is permissible. A mustache, if worn, will be neatly trimmed. It may follow the natural curve of the mouth, but will not extend below the corner of the mouth or any portion of the upper lip, and will not extend onto or over the cheek area. That was the current or the recent language. So after the change of the grooming standard, I included the language at the very bottom where it says, I ask you to adopt and replace with the wording below. Male officers may have facial hair and mustache, beard, or goatee while in uniform. All facial hair must be trimmed early, neatly at all times. If only a mustache is chosen, then it must follow the natural curve of the mouth. It may not extend below the corner of the mouth or any portion of the upper lip. That's just with a mustache. It may not extend onto the cheek. Beards or goatee will not exceed more than 1 inch in length. I think 1 inch is more than enough without getting into the full Grizzly Adams type beard. I think Commissioner Martin mentioned it when we were discussing that one time before, as far as the grooming standard being changed, as long as it's trimmed and neat. And there should be, some type of length on it to give them some kind of guideline as to how much of a beard they can grow.
Is that just standard wording like you got from somewhere else, or is that kind of?
That's actually wording I got from somewhere else.
Okay.
I did change a few words in it, but the overall narrative, I kind of picked and selected some things that was in there from another agency that currently has a grooming standard to make it comparable to other agencies.
Is there anything we have to vote on, or we can just?
Yeah, we need to substitute adopt the new A.
I'll make a motion, we adopt the new A.
Second. Motion made by Commissioner Rose, seconded by Commissioner Martin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, motion is unanimous.
Chief, I have a question.
Sure.
I see it says citations issued state or town. Is that for like speeding tickets
Citation, where are you at?
on the activity law?
I'm looking at it. Oh, state of town. Yeah, well, that could either be, most of it, I think it's gonna be like parking citations. It could mean citations as well. They could be like one, and it could be a speeding citation, it could be a infraction, it could be any of those. It's not specific as far as speeding. I don't think there's that specific wording on the RMS for our government software for our police pack. So it could be either one.
Because I was wondering, I've been watching and looking at them, and I've never seen anything that says anything about how many speeding tickets we issue per month.
Yeah, I can break that down and also include that in it. Normally, what we do is when we generate this activity log, the officers will incorporate that information into Police Pack, which is a software we use, Southern software, where we generate all our incident reports and some of our accident reports and things of that nature. So
Now, are we also still patrolling 170? I think it starts from, I guess, like Princeton Church, all the way back up towards the Ormond's.
we are, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because what we generally do is, just to kind of give you an overview, is I had two just to ride each and every street in town, every street in the city limits, just to gauge how long it takes and how many miles an hour the officer is traveling. So the average for an officer to conduct a complete patrol of the town is about 55 minutes. And that's covering every street in town, and that's within the city limits, or our ETJ, as far as that's concerned. And that's traveling at 5 to 10 miles below the posted speed limit, with the exception of Highway 70. You can't go too slow on 70. But that covers the entire town. Now, what happens is, generally at night, the officer might make about 4 passes, 5 passes. That depends on whether he gets a call, that depends on if he's held up at the jail, that depends on if he gets a DWI, that depends on, because those take quite a bit of time. Depends on if he gets an involuntary commitment. It also depends on if they're assisting pilot level mutual aid or something else, drastic occurs during their shift. So they try to get in several passes. Now, sometimes, some areas of town, because of some criminal activity, might require more attention than other areas. And sometimes we might spend a little time over there. So general consensus, it might be 5 or 6, 4, 5, 6 passes, they complete passes. But that can be interrupted at any time. But they still are patrolling that whole entire area. That means across the highway, Eagles, North Side, Princeton Church of God, and even down to the Asphalt Company.
Because I know sometimes, I know when I first moved here, I used to see them a lot on 70. And so that's why I was asking. We had kind of scaled back some on what.
There's been a lot of discussion over the past years about officers being on Highway 70, and that goes way, way back, even when I started. So we don't technically patrol 70. If we're going from point A to point B, and point A and point B means like Handy Mark to Princeton Church of God, or Princeton Church of God back to Handy Mark, or from Handy Mark across the highway to, North Side or Eagles Crest. If we're going to one of those areas, there's a blatant infraction, then they'll take care of it. If there's someone that's traveling at high rate of speed, and the officer observed, someone driving or something that caught his attention, then they will address it. But just riding up and down 70, they don't do that.
I've got a question on that, because obviously I've been one of the most outspoken probably since December about Highway 70. And every time I bring it up, that's what I hear. There's an issue with patrolling 70. It's from a long-standing issue back. But nobody ever tells me what that issue is. It's like it's top secret. Nobody wants to say what it is.
I can, well, the issue is that for many, many years, all the town limits were on the south side of 70. None of Highway 70 was in the town limits. And so previous boards and police chiefs did not want the Princeton police officer patrolling 70 because they were essentially outside of town. So since we have done some annexations on the north side of 70, there are 2 areas of 70 that are in the town limits. And that is from the end of Dr. Jones Boulevard up to just past Dr. Jones Boulevard. It doesn't even go all the way to Barden Street. And then there's an area from Bojangles to the end of Dr. Jones Boulevard. Those are the only two pieces of 70 that are in our town limits. So there's a big gap between just before you get to Barden Street going to the east and when you get to Bojangles that's not in the town limits.
But, now, obviously, Princeton Church of God is in our town limits.
It is.
But from that, it's saying, 70 is not.
Yeah, so 70 from just before Barden Street when you're heading east, all the way down to Bojangles, that whole corridor is not in the town limits. And we don't have any, no part of 70 adjacent to Church of God is in the town limits either. But that doesn't mean we can't, access the town limits at one end and go to the town end at the other end to create a presence. But there's only certain areas through there that are actually in the town limits. And
Well, the section on 70 that you say right here is not in town limits.
yeah, Barden Street, we're not in town
because
limits.
So we have no jurisdiction.
We go out there
We
if
do
there,
have some jurisdiction within the ETJ if
Yeah.
we're dispatched.
yeah.
And the reason I'm asking, because I have been asked by citizens why we're not patrolling. And I can't tell them, because I've never been able to get a correct answer. In fact, I had invited some of them to request a bid meeting so they could ask.
We, in the past, and I'll just add this, just piggybacking off what Marlon mentioned. In the past, and this has been years ago, because you mentioned, the subject came up and no one could answer that question, was several years ago, and I mean over 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago. And I think Commissioner Martin had said in on one of those meetings at one point that we had with the former chief. But sometimes things would occur in town, and the officers was out on the highway patrolling, running radar, doing traffic enforcement. And when things would take place in town, the first question that would be asked is, well, why are they out there on 70? They should be in town. These things are happening in town, and they're out there on 70 running radar. So it kind of morphed into this big conflict with the officers being out on Highway 70 and not actually being in town when things were happening, or certain crimes might erupt in town, and it caused a really big problem. So I think along with what Marla mentioned, plus the fact that it caused some conflict with the officers not being in place and not being in the area and patrolling the areas that was part of the city limits. Instead, they were on the highway, writing citations for speed violations.
People used to call in and complain if they would see officers stop too many cars on the city.
Well, I'll tell you what.
But now, and let me tell you this too about when you work places like Sydney and whenever you work traffic. Whenever you move to a bigger pond, you have more opportunity to catch fish. And the fish that you catch may take you to the master's office. Whenever you are the only officer on, then you kind of have to make a decision. Am I going to do something that could get me out of the city for an extended period of time, which will leave no one else here to take calls. And now, having worked at a much larger place, you would think that we wouldn't have that conversation there, but we also did. Because if officers do a lot of traffic, you were gonna find stuff that will get you tied up. And a larger place like that, there is someone else to answer the call, but now they're getting a little bit upset at you because you're doing that and they're doing nothing but taking reports. But whenever you come to a place where there's only one officer, because you have to make a decision, and I think for the most part that the officers have made the decision that they're going to stop what they see, but they aren't going to be proactive out there.
Well, it's kind of hard to stop what you see if you're not out there and not see it. It's kind of hard to see it if you're over here.
And I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
All I'm saying is
it depends
in
on
the
the
morning,
circumstances.
in the morning between 7:30 and 8:30, 9 o'clock, when you got so much traffic crossing 70, and from 2:30, 3 o'clock till 4, what would it hurt? I mean, when you got so many kids crossing this road, you got a lot of inexperienced drivers crossing this highway, and people are flying through here. I mean, I travel it every day, and I see it. The people come through here, and they act like there's no speed limit coming through Princeton. They don't care. The same thing I've asked about the signs, putting the signs out there. Well, I found out now, we got 2 signs sitting down there at the treatment plant. Don't get used for anything. There's 2 behind the station here. What would it hurt to put them out there, at least to make people aware, hey, you're coming into a 55-mile-an-hour zone, pay attention.
Well,
But it seems like every time I mention it, it just, nobody wants to do it.
well, and I don't want you to feel like, it's falling deaf ears, because it's not. I mean, in regards to the signs that we have down there, those signs, they are beneficial depending on what they're used for. I know that when it comes down to the DOT, I'm very particular about making sure that they don't have an issue with anything being on the highway like that. It's one thing when we put them inside the city limits, but it's something different when we put signage on the actual highway that is maintained, by the DOT. So I'm very cautious about that. As far as the morning traffic and the evening traffic, and I've said this before, we kind of know where things are now. There's only one person working during the day, and that's me. I would love to be in 5 places at one time, but I can't. I was just telling someone that the other day. I have people coming in, I have people calling, I have people that stop in and don't even schedule an interview, or not an interview, but a meeting. There's quite a few phone calls I get a day. When I come back in, I got to return calls. Then I get called to the school because Chase needs me to go out there and either investigate an accident in the PBA, or I have to go out to the school. And just to give you an example, and I was going to mention this a little bit later, but last week I had to go out to the school. I was called out there, elementary school, because there was a parent that was picking up his daughter, and he drove, there's 2 lines that go in, that drive up, when they pick up their kids, there's 2 lines that are right in front of the school in the PBA. And there's a gap in between those 2 lines, but it's not a gap, the gap is not there for people to drive through it. So this gentleman drove straight through the gap and hit several cars. That tied me up for an extended period of time. More so, I was supposed to have a meeting, I think it was at 4, and I couldn't even make the meeting because I was stuck over there. And then I got another call, but that call had to wait because I was over there. So it is extremely hard when you have one officer that's on duty to get to all these places. people, they want us to be in several places, and I do understand. I understand it's tax dollars at work, but we just can't be everywhere. We can't address all those things at one time. I wish I could. I wish I could, but I can't. But that particular incident, he wound up being arrested, and Tool actually, came on duty a little early so he can take care of that, because I was dealing with his daughter. I had to call social service. I had to deal with the school, Miss Gurley. I had to deal with Miss Hurst. Everybody had questions, wanted to know what's going on. I had passengers that was upset, motors. So it was a drawn out process. It was long, and it was time intensive.
Well, and I understand that. And I'm not saying to patrol it every day, all day long.
Right.
I'm not. Because I know you can't do it so much.
Right.
But, any bit of help. But back to the signs, the issue with the DOT, as you know, I work in construction.
Right.
I work on the side of the road all the time. We set up lane closures, we set up signs all the time. I've never had an issue with DOT setting up a sign.
Was that a municipality want to set up a sign for their use, or was that for some kind of construction that was being set up?
It's for construction.
So when you cross over to a municipality that wants a sign on the side of the road, that's a little different. I'll give you a point or an example. With the parade, we had one of DOT's employees, I think it was the Christmas parade, and we were just shutting off certain streets. And we had one of the DOT employees that got upset and approached an officer that was assisting us from another agency. And it was literally an argument. So I had to address that situation with the DOT out of Wilson, the supervisor. So we first addressed the attitude and the behavior of the employee that was not even on duty, that was with his family, that made the comment. And then we addressed, what we could do better, which is, you need to contact the DOT, you need to get their approval. Those are the barriers that I'm talking about. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying you do have to go through the DOT and make sure they're okay with it. And it's a little different when you're dealing with construction or any company that's contracted with the DOT, because you're doing work for the state. But when you're dealing with a municipality,
well, a lot of mine is not with the state. It's not for the state.
It's not for the state at all.
No.
Is it just construction on the road though?
It's construction, board under the highways, just like we did on the train tracks out here. It can be for private, industry, subdivisions. It cannot be DOT related at all.
Right. I'm not against it. I'm just saying that there's a bit of a process, and they do have to approve that, because it's dealing with the police department wanting to put a sign out there on their highway. I know we have to get permission. We want to do things on a road that's maintained by the DOT inside the city limits. But I'm not against it. I'm not against it at all.
But it would be my recommendation, and that I would say, especially at this point, because we probably should not be trying to do that kind of traffic enforcement, because we just don't have enough personnel to do it. Because if you go out there, that officer can't be at two places, and you can easily make a stop that could take you off the road for most of the day, and then you have nothing.
Quick question, Chief, I don't know the answer. Like, say if you just called Highway Patrol and said, "Can you help us out? We got one officer on duty. Can you make sure you got some cars a little bit, and if it's this stretch of 70 a little bit more, would Highway Patrol oblige?"
We've had discussions in the past, and I know most recently, I think the sheriff had contacted them when we were had discussions about needing someone out shortly after that accident, that death, and they came out, but it was only for a short period. They don't mind coming out, but they're stretched in. it wouldn't be an everyday thing. Just like with the accidents out on 70, the previous first sergeant asked me, any help that you can give me, basically, because, we'll be happy to take that accident, but if you can get it for us, because it's right there close, please do. So even if it's a little further than where our intersections are, we might get that if it's close enough to the city limit. So I have had discussions with them before. Now, as far as just calling them up and saying, hey, can you have some highway patrol this area? They'll be more than happy to, but it wouldn't be an ongoing thing. And they like to see, the police department working with them and seeing some cars out there as well, since it's our city, but they also know how, short we are. But no, they wouldn't mind doing that. It wouldn't be a lot of consistency with it though.
But now the highway patrol does work Princeton area.
They do.
I was gonna say they were out there today.
Yeah.
They had two
I mean,
cars out there today.
Yeah, they do work. They do.
I mean, I go up and down 70 highway several times a day, and that they constantly work that area.
I saw one at the Dollar General. I mean, I don't see them every day, but I've seen them often out here. So they do come through here.
Well, I think my question with the speeding was, pretty much here in town. Because here lately I've been watching some folk that, come through kind of quickly.
Right.
And, just to look at the car, you're like, okay, that's a little bit higher than the speed limit. So, I know some of the kids are beginning to ride bikes and stuff. So, and then I'm an avid bike rider myself.
Right.
So I'm just trying not to get hit.
We do radar enforcement, and I call it radar enforcement. Some people call it other things, but speed traps are illegal, so we don't do that. We do radar enforcement, and so sometimes they'll be at the opposite end of Don H. Jones Boulevard, and they'll run radar down there. They'll do speed enforcement down there, and then sometimes it depends on where it is. Sometimes they'll be on Pine Street, and it just depends on what time of the day it is. But we try to catch the school traffic. Sometimes I'll go out there and sit, and it just kind of depends. People will slow down. Sometimes you pull them over. And we try to do as much speed enforcement as we possibly can. And then a lot of times you'll catch people coming through there when you're just not there. If you're somewhere else in another part of town, you'll have somebody speeding through that area, and then we'll go over there and sit, and we think we've kind of controlled it a little bit, but people are very smart. They know that you only have one person working. They can tell you where that person is. So
And I don't want to close this part of the conversation, but if we've got the traffic signs, I don't think they need to be in the garage. That's what I think that's sort of what we're wanting, is to put them where they're visible. And sometimes people are not trying to speed, but they may exceed the speed limit unintentionally. And that
you
may
talking
get,
about the message boards? Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about? I mean, I don't have a problem with that. If the DOT says, hey, that's fine. I mean, I don't have an issue with them being out there. And I've got one more thing I gotta cover. I don't wanna,
I do have one other thing to add. Have you had any complaints from anybody about the dump trucks coming through town? Because I was actually out at the ballpark Friday, and Trooper Cox stopped in there, asked to use the bathroom. And he said that they had been notified that the dump trucks were coming through there exceedingly fast.
I have sat, matter of fact, I was over there today, I was on Pine Street, and sometimes I'll go on Pearl Street. And I haven't seen it, I had my radar unit on, so I haven't seen them exceed the speed limit according to my radar. I do know that the large tires fluctuate the speed on my radar, so the dump truck that appears to be going a little faster, they're not going as fast according to the radar unit, because the size of the tire makes a difference. Now, I did get a complaint from someone who called in about dump trucks over by Edwards Road, right before you get, coming from the rock quarry, right before you get to Handymore. I did get someone that called in about that, but I did explain to them that that was, that I would contact the motor carrier and see if they would address that. But I've seen motor carrier services out, highway patrol out there by Cornwallis Road and over here. I haven't seen them in town, but I've driven
He was
out
here
there.
Friday.
Yeah,
He was running back and forth.
I've seen, occasionally I'll see, motor carriers come through town, occasionally. But I haven't seen any recently, but I will say that I have been out there as well. And normally they come through Pine Street, and sometimes they come through, Crow Street.
They were doing Cornwallis Road today.
We're doing 70 today also. They were down there on Prince Church of God running this way. In fact, they had one stop at the sanctuary. Car.
No, I'm talking about DMV doing
Yeah.
the trucks.
Motor carrier. Now, they sit out there by Handy Mart in that little pathway adjacent, well, right beside Handy Mart. I've seen 3 or 4 of them sit over there and just wait for them to leave to walk for it. But I have seen their presence here. And, we've got a board meeting on Monday, I'm sorry, not a board meeting, but a monthly chiefs meeting on Wednesday. So the first sergeant is usually there, and, we'll have a conversation about it again. And he can reach out to that particular unit.
You got some other items?
I got one more. Actually, it's just a reminder, Marla put in a memorandum about Officer Toole. He, I think on March the 24th, he was evaluated by a panel of his peers through an oral interview process comprised of a total of 48 questions and scenarios. At the conclusion of the assessment, and this assessment was for the police lieutenant promotion. At the conclusion of the assessment, all the reviewers recommended Toole for the promotion to the police position of lieutenant. And I evaluated all relevant information and promoted Officer Toole to Lieutenant 2, effective 4th. But that wasn't without submitting a packet to Marla for her review, and that packet including my assessment as well as my report based on what the information was I received from the oral board. And she was in agreement with me based on the information before.
And you'll, based on he will start out as a police lieutenant effective today at the minimal salary level.
Yes, but on that pay scale, the reason it's in yellow is we didn't specifically vote on the pay for that position in February, and so I need you to vote to make that the pay scale for that position.
I was wondering when we passed that, why didn't we, I was wondering that at the time, but I didn't ask that question.
I really can't answer it. But I had it on the,
I don't think you were planning to fill that position at that point.
well, I had on the classification in my records, but on what translated and what I presented to you, I did not show it to you.
Well, I respect that Officer Toole has moved up in his experience, moved up in in the lieutenant position. I think it's a great idea to enhance your employment, and I've experienced his growth as well as you have.
He's earned it. He's got 12 years experience, and he did step up, and he started taking on additional duties and responsibilities. So he's exceeded my expectations.
So there's a motion to accept the pay scale for the police lieutenant's salary range.
There is.
Motion made by Commissioner Martin. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Robinson. Further discussion?
Is this, we're not voting anything, like the chief promotes, we're just voting on the pay scale, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hearing no further discussion, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, motion is unanimous. Keep working on that recruitment.
Absolutely.
Chad, we do have your report in front of us.
hope everyone's doing well. I only had two things other than what's in the packets. I did want to cover on June code. They're finishing up the curbing. I think they finished up most of it today. I think they still have a little bit left to do. But other than that, all they have left is paving. They're gonna be milling part of Edward Street and Center Street and paving back to the curbing ends. Hopefully they'll finish up this month is the plan. So, other than that, this week is one of our 2 cleanup weeks of the year. So we'll be making rounds for yard debris as well as household items every day this week. Today alone, we hauled off 5 truckloads of yard debris and about a half a load of household items. So citizens are very well taking advantage of it so far. Other than that, that's all I have. Do you have any questions or concerns?
Thank you for what you're doing, and
So, what's that? Thank you. Well done, man. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
discuss chain of command.
That I asked to, have that added, several months ago, the board voted to change, part of the personnel policy that outlined, what the duties of the commissioners were, and that I thought that those that voted for that change were adamant that the personnel, that the staff would all report to the administrator, and that change in policy was meant to make sure that that's what happened. And the incident occurred that that apparently that wasn't what actually took place. That I said that to say this, that whenever we changed the policy, I think myself and Commissioner Rose voted against the change. The other members of the board voted for it, and Mayor actually broke the tie. And so we can't be going back and forth of having policy that we won't enforce, and then whenever we change it, that we do the opposite to what we actually asked for. And so that the board voted to change the policy that basically that all of the staff reports to the administrator, that their schedules, their time, that they go to an administrator to get approved. And that's what policy says, and it's my recommendation that that's what the board should be doing.
Okay. Next is the capital budgets for downtown
Oh,
Drake.
wait a minute. So is is there gonna be no conversation?
I'm still trying to figure out what you were in referencing. You said a couple months ago.
Remember a couple months back, that I think you, Commissioner Brown and the mayor voted to, change the policy, about what the schedule of the officers could be, and the duties that the board members had the authority to assign, and in them that we clearly said that those type functions, that the staff would report to the administrator.
So, no, I guess my question is, are you suggesting that we go back to what we had?
No. Mm-mm. That we actually do what the new policy says, and let the administrator handle the staff fully.
Well, now, you're contradicting yourself, because a while ago you said you voted to stay like it was, now you're saying to stay like it is now.
No, because you misunderstood me. That the board voted to change the policy. And so where that the old policy said that the board actually set the schedules and so forth. You, Commissioner Brown and Mayor said that the administrator ought to do that.
Yeah, because I think that was during the time that we were talking about the scheduling for the chief, and we were talking about singing
and also
micromanaged.
So the thing that I'm saying is that that's what the board said that they wanted to do, and that's what the board needs to do.
So I guess my question is, so it's not being done?
That so apparently not.
Let me cut to the chase. It is being done, but there are certain circumstances, and probably 3 weeks ago, I had 3 or 4 complaints that there was nobody on duty. The administrator was not in town. 911 was not aware that there was not a policeman on duty. So I confronted the situation to make sure we had somebody on duty. And I found out there was nobody on duty. But Marla was informed, and we had a conversation later, and I'm held accountable, she's held accountable, each of you are held accountable. But clearly Marla is in charge of personnel, and I have no problem with that. But, when there was a crisis in the community, including water and sewer, and Marla's not available, or she's on vacation, I talked to Chad. And I don't have but I'm not disrespectful for whoever's in charge, and we need to be respectful of having a town manager, town administrator. I get along with Marla very well, and I feel like she has a continuity of making sure this town functions in a proper perspective. You'll see some grants that she's obtained for us, and our town runs smoothly because she looks after our personnel. But, you know, we're all held accountable, and I'll leave it at that. Okay. Amend the capital budgets for the drainage. This was basically something that was, we got additional money and we just need to amend the budget.
Yes, we got in June of 2021, we got an additional $527,905 from Golden Leaf for the downtown drainage project. But at that time, we failed to amend the capital project ordinance, and we've reached the point in the project we need to spend that money. So in order to do it legally, we need to amend the capital projects budget.
So is there a motion to do such?
There is.
Motion made by Commissioner Martin. We have the money in our budget, this just needs to be, it's part of our capital budget. Is there a motion, a second to that motion?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? And the next item is the recycling grant.
Lee's got to do that because Lee wrote it. Woo!
No, it was a tag team effort.
Lee took the lead.
We got an email sometime, latter part of January or so, about a 2022 Community Waste Reduction Recycling Grant proposal. So I forwarded the email to Marla. Marla forwarded it back and said, go with it. And I'm thinking, I've not wrote a grant in my life. So I did a draft. April reviewed behind me, so to make sure it all made sense and we worked together. And then Marla kind of crunched the numbers. So we officially have a $25,000 state grant, and we only matched $5,000 of it, and we get the approximately 445 more 95-gallon recycling bins, and they will also help us and pretty much do a new recycling brochure. It'll be much bigger than what we hand out now, in hopes to encourage the rest of the community and as we grow. Because I just out here and did the figuring. We have 284 existing, and if we purchase these next 445, we will have 729, and that's just enough, and that gives us about 7 additional leftovers. And of course, we know we've got a new subdivision coming, but I think that's a good start for Princeton to encourage more recycling and not just have the little bins.
So we take a lot of little bins and give everybody a great big cart for $5,000.
Well, thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
But we need to accept it.
I don't think that's, you know, I'm not trying to railroad, but is there a motion?
There is.
Is there a second?
There is.
Motion made by Commissioner Martin, second by Commissioner Robinson, all in favor? Raise your right hand. All opposed? Okay.
On that note, really quick, I know we're already going. I've thought, and I keep forgetting, we are near capacity on our sewer plant, and one thing I thought that maybe, and I know we make money by selling water and sewer, but in your searching of grants, if there was anything out there that maybe was able to get money for our customers to have water saving features in their home, maybe shower nozzle. If everybody cut their water usage by 15 or 20%, that's not going in the sewer. That's not going into the sewer plant. So I mean, it's another way to increase our capacity in a way without you know, if there's some money out there to help us somehow do that. I've thought if everybody used 10% less water, that's 10% less going into the thing.
Through Duke Energy, because they sent me shower heads, faucet things, and something else for free.
Yeah, maybe it could be just an educational plan that we kind of ask people to get on board with.
In 2004, we had a conservation plan because and we structured our rates to assist in that conservation.
That's something to look at to help us get by till we can expand.
And hopefully in closure, we'll meet shortly, but the the stream flow rehabilitation assistance program was sent in by deadline to the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, and we need to make sure that they look at our application and react favorably. But it's about a $700,000 grant,
652.
$652,000. That will cover Beaver Dam Creek from the waste treatment plant to Libby Smith Road, getting all that debris out.
It features photography by Commissioner Rose and Brian Holland. We put Brian in the creek.
Cool.
Is there any other business before us that
We have a good chance of getting that grant?
Quick, I put two things in your packet. The questionnaire from the retired Robert Bradford, it's in there for your review, and a memo on the fire department. They were supposed to meet last Monday, it got postponed till tonight, so we'll have it on May's agenda. The next meeting is Tuesday, April 19th, our budget meeting.
That brings up another question. The three of us have asked, do we want to live budget meetings, or do we just want to go when we adopt?
Well, actually, part of that meeting is.
Right, but do
It'll be a
you,
called meeting, so we'll have to.
you will need to do it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Were we actually supposed to get this question now? Because I'm thinking no.
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but you might be right.
Yeah. So, why don't we just give her back the question now? Yeah, I think that's all. That probably should is personnel.
But your question about that grant, do we have a good chance of getting it? There's $38 million in the program. And if you go to the website for that particular grant, it says it's to assist small towns in cleaning up storm debris that may be causing
Are you
flood.
getting close and close?
So, I mean, it's like
I might have stuck it on
they were describing Princeton.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't otherwise be able to afford the going to a stream and cleaning it up.
Okay.
And so,
It's in here somewhere.
if you run into any state, the state legislature set this money aside. So if you run into state
Yeah, it's like
legislatures,
first
you can let them know we apply.
Just to let you know
Actually,
how
to
that,
be specific,
May,
it's John Bill's bill. John
Mayor
Bill's bill.
Almond stuff.
That's good.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Because they didn't have papers.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'm gonna have to call you to order. There's a motion on the table to adjourn. Is there? There is. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand.
Yeah.
All opposed?
There it is.
There it is.
Because